Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the introductions made by our colleagues. I particularly appreciate the willingness of the nominees to serve our country in foreign posts, particularly at such a critical time. We face a number of challenges, some among friends deciding how we can collaborate together to be stronger and provide for our respective populations, but some relate to other nations. Russia, in particular, poses an ongoing threat to Europe and to places around the world. China has set its tentacles into Europe and is intending to become the leader of the world in military and economic terms. And so the work that we anticipate doing together with our friends and allies around the world is of critical importance. I have more extensive comments I'll ask the chairman to include in the record. But with that introduction, we will be happy to turn to your statements and our respective questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Barrett, a number of us were concerned as we saw that Luxembourg signed on to the Belt and Road initiative that China has been promoting throughout the world. And I'm interested in your perspective, if you have that at this stage, about what the status of that is in Luxembourg. And what you think our objectives might be with regards to communicating with Luxembourg on that topic, and perhaps encouraging them to take a course which is less favorable to China.
Senator Romney, thank you for that question. And I hope I got the gist of it. My technology is a little sketchy right now, but it sounded like you were asking about the Belt and Road Initiative and the fact that Luxembourg has signed on to it, which it has, in fact, one of the few Western European countries that has done so. Luxembourg prides itself on having good relations, investment relations with many countries throughout the world. And that, I think, is one of the factors that led it to signing this. At the same time, obviously, as a key member of the European Union, it recognizes that it's working with its neighbors. I think we're also fortunate that because of our strong historic ties, our economic ties, our community of interest in terms of democracy, that provides a checkpoint, if you will, and we'll make sure that we will continue to work, but with Luxembourg. And if I am confirmed, I certainly plan to work with Luxembourg to make sure that they understand, which I am very confident that they do, the challenges that come from that Chinese initiative. So again, I think that because of our historic ties, I think that puts us in a good place. But it is something that, if confirmed, I am very, very sensitive to and mindful of the challenges that it presents.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize if you couldn't hear me, but your response was spot on to the question I asked. So appreciate that. Ms. Harpootlian, I'm interested in your perspective on how the people of Slovenia and the leadership of Slovenia looks at Russia, what they think Russia's objectives might be in the Balkans. What type of commitment you think we can make to supporting the independence of the Balkans from Russia influence? But I guess the beginning of that question is, do you have a sense of how the leadership in Slovenia and the people of Slovenia consider Russia objectives, what they consider them to be with regards to the Balkans? You're muted, I'm sorry.
Thank you for the question, Senator, and I'm happy to address it. So I first want to point out that Slovenia is a very strong NATO ally, and it shares our democratic values and interests. Slovenia's heart is in the West, and that's something it's important to remember that when we're talking about Russia and China engagement. The fact is that Russia and Slovenia do have an active economic relationship, and they have cultural ties and diplomatic ties, and they've engaged in high-level visits. But Slovenia is very aware of issues regarding destabilization, and in particular, the fact that by virtue of geology and existing infrastructure, Russia provides virtually all of Slovenia's natural gas. So in response to that, Slovenia and the United States have been working together. They've signed a memorandum of understanding on civil nuclear cooperation for clean and safe nuclear energy. Slovenia is very interested in developing a second nuclear reactor, and the US is interested in competing for providing the technology on that. The US also supports Slovenia in an initiative called the Three Seas Initiative, and that is designed to develop infrastructure on north-south access, which would compete with the old Soviet east-west infrastructure lines. So all of these are steps that Slovenia is taking to create independence from Russia influence in the country. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I think my time is up, so I'll turn back to you, and I'll get a chance to continue with the others in the next round. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of comments as we talk about international tax rates. We don't know exactly what's going to happen here, of course, but I do think there's a difference between leaders coming together over a social event and drinks and meetings and saying, hey, let's all agree to a 15% international tax rate, and that actually becoming the law, being passed by their respective parliaments and congresses and so forth. I think there's a big gap between that. I wouldn't want to see a circumstance where we in our nation took action which would then not be matched by other nations and put our enterprises at a competitive disadvantage. So depending on what we do here, it'll be important to make sure that other nations follow through as well. Let me turn to Mr. Miller with regards to our relationships in Switzerland. Obviously, a nation which is given to high standards of human rights, historically a nation which considers itself to be a leader on various social issues. And I wonder how they square that with a relatively friendly relationship with China. China carrying out genocide. I mean, in this day and age, for a nation to be carrying out genocide is really inexplicable. And I wonder whether the Swiss are going to be able to continue to look away from the reality of what's happening in China, and whether you might be able to help them understand that their interests really lie in becoming closer and closer with those nations which honor the same types of values they have long said they espouse.
Thank you, Senator Romney. As you aptly point out, how we approach China, our greatest competitor, is a focus that all of us, if we're lucky enough to be confirmed, will have to address. The good news for me in a potential if confirmed relationship with Switzerland is that Switzerland does already have a long-standing meeting and dialogue that they've had with People's Republic of China starting since 1991. Unfortunately, due to COVID, many of these conversations have been postponed, but also I would like to point out that Switzerland did come out and join the criticism of the situation in Xinjiang and also the Uyghurs, the situation that's obviously happening with the Uyghurs. I do hope that Switzerland will be proactive in reestablishing that conversation, that annual conversation, to make sure that they understand that China is doing these practices. And I think that it's also incumbent upon the Swiss government to be proactive in having a dialogue with the companies based in Switzerland to make sure that they understand also the risks of doing business in China. I am fully aware of, and I think we all are on this as we testify today, that the threat that China poses is significant, and we must work with all of our interlocutors on making sure in our meetings that they understand that despite needing the economic relations perhaps with the People's Republic, that it's also still okay to criticize them and hold them accountable, and to make sure that we're pushing them to do better every day.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Ramanathan, Sweden has shown a lot of backbone relative to perhaps other countries in the world as it relates to Russia and to China, for that matter. And China has retaliated against a number of Swedish businesses, Ericsson among others. Do you have a sense of whether there's backsliding on the part of the leadership or the business community in Sweden? Meaning, are the backbones still strong, and how can we encourage them to continue to have the kind of strength they've had in the past? Because we may need to step in and show them that if they're punished by one side, they can be more rewarded by the other.
Well, thank you, Senator, for that question. And my sense is that the backbone of Sweden is strong indeed. While they are a trading nation reliant on trade for half of their GDP, they understand and are clear-eyed about what that means with respect to China, the need to protect sensitive infrastructure and intellectual property and the like. You mentioned 5G and Ericsson. Obviously, they, as you may be aware, the administrative courts in Sweden have upheld Swedish regulations banning Huawei and ZTE from Sweden's own 5G build-out, which I think sends an important signal about the continued focus on protecting sensitive infrastructure. Obviously, Ericsson has also invested, opening a new $134 million plant in Texas, working on 5G equipment and other investments in the United States on that front, and we've been a good partner of Ericsson's. So I think these are indications that things are very, very strong. But if confirmed, I look forward to continuing that close dialogue and continuing to ensure that we are creative and collaborative in ways that we find to ensure our mutual security and prosperity.
Thank you, Mr. Ramanathan. Mr. Chairman, time back to you. I've asked the questions I came with.